is one of our Wednesday webinars. Actually, I believe this is the third or maybe the fourth one we've done in March. And we just see one of our strategic priorities is to provide professional development to health science educators across the nation. And certainly this pandemic has thrust us into being able to do that in a big way. And so if you were with us last week, we did a couple of webinars for health science state leaders as well as health science teachers. And we provided online resources and lots of detail to be helpful to those of you who are delivering your curriculum digitally. That recording is posted at healthscienceconsortium.org/webinars, along with a PowerPoint that has some links to some online resources that some of our very generous partners shared, as well as some teachers who created a large Google Drive for you to be able to use in your classrooms. So this happens a couple of Wednesdays a month, and today we're excited to have one of our partners with us from the American Medical Technologies, and they are professional members of the National Consortium for Health Science Education, and Kathy Cilia serves as the representative for professional associations to our executive council. So we were thrilled when she would bring on Nicole, and they would provide this opportunity for you. They are all recorded, so you can go back. We're getting some feedback, so if someone's not muted, if you can make sure you're muted, as well as make sure your video is on. The webinars are recorded, like I said, and this PowerPoint will be there as well for your reference, and they have some other resource materials that they've allowed us, with their permission, that we'll post on our website as well. If you need documentation for attending this 1 hour of professional development, we are more than happy to create a certificate for you. If your documentation would be satisfied by actually printing the confirmation email that you registered, we encourage you to use that as well. However, if you need an official certificate from the consortium, you just need to email me, and then we'll get that back to you electronically. I think that's all I need to say, except for Kathy and Nicole will have about 40 to 45 minutes of content for you, and then we'll reserve the last 10 to 15 minutes for contributions and questions, and we'll put that in the chat feature for you to share or get involved in the closing part of this webinar. So with that being said, I'm going to turn it over, I think, to Kathy. She's going to do some introductions, and thank you so much, Kathy Cilia, for being with us.
Nancy, is it possible for you to unmute Kathy's cell phone line? She's saying that the audio on her computer isn't working.
Okay. Well, we wouldn't know. We can look for her cell phone do you know what her cell phone number is? Because
yes, it's the 708 number.
Okay. So can you go ahead and start, and then Phyllis will be looking for the 708 number and get her unmuted.
Okay.
She should be unmuted now.
Okay, good. Thank you, Phyllis.
Kathy, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Good. Good. Thank you for doing that. Okay, so we're ready to start here. Hello, everyone. Thank you for taking time out of your busy day to listen to this webinar. I know that the last few weeks have been extremely stressful for everyone. You know that all of your students are suddenly being sent home. I think the case in almost every state now. And it's not just for spring break, it's for an extended period of time. And schools like you are scrambling to find online material and resources to fill that time gap. And I just wanted to tell you that we are also feeling the stress here at AMT from the other side. We are a certification body and have had an influx of calls from students and schools who have not yet had a chance to complete their externships so they're in the middle of their externship, or they haven't yet started their externships, and the clinical sites, as you can imagine, are busy with patients, and so they haven't had a chance to do that. And then in addition to that, our students take exams through Pearson VUE testing centers, and all of them have closed temporarily. So students and schools are scrambling, trying to figure out what to do. So it's really, really been crazy. And I think it's been like that for everyone, and it's been like that everywhere. But we are resilient and flexible and able to quickly come together to make it all work out. So again, thank you very much for being here during this very challenging time. So the subject of our talk today is industry recognized credentials. It's a term that's used out there, but we just wanted to give you the perspective of a professional credentialing agency and what that term means to us. So now, by way of introductions, you're seeing the slide here. I am Kathy Cilia, the one on the lower left, the Deputy Executive Director for AMT. I've been with AMT for about 12 years. And in my previous life, I worked in a clinical laboratory, and you've been hearing a lot about clinical laboratories at this time because of the coronavirus. So yes, I would have been out there doing those tests if I was still in the laboratory. But most of my career has been spent working in a healthcare professional association like AMT. And with me today is our senior psychometrician, Nicole. So before I started working at AMT, I had absolutely no idea what a psychometrician was or what one did, but I learned very quickly. And after seeing this presentation, I think you'll get a better appreciation as well. So Nicole, would you like to briefly introduce yourself?
Sure. Thank you, Kathy. I have been with AMT for about 7 years now, working as a psychometrician alongside our director of test development. And there's been a lot of changes at AMT since I have been there. We've added a number of new certifications, and it's been very exciting, and there's always a lot to learn. And I've learned a lot about the healthcare and allied health industry just being with AMT, because my background is really measurement and statistics prior to entering the certification world.
Okay, so let's get started. So next slide, please. All right, and this is what we plan to cover today. First of all, we'll go over the overall healthcare landscape as we see it and what it means to all of you. And then we'll quickly go over some definition of terms. They're probably terms that you're all familiar with, but we just wanted to make sure that everyone was on the same page. And then we'll turn it over to Nicole, who will get into how certification exams are developed. And then finally, we'll cover your role in developing the future healthcare workers. It's the next slide. All right, so we see three major forces working for us, or in this particular case, it's really against us in the healthcare field. So the first is the general demographics of the US population. As you all know, there are many baby boomers out there, and they're about ready to retire. 1 in 4 Americans are over the age of 65, and 10,000 boomers reach retirement age each day, and this includes healthcare workers. So we know that that's a very scary statistic. In addition, we have about 80% of the seniors that are living with at least one chronic health condition. And again, this is another scary statistic because we see it, especially now with this corona crisis. Those are the people that are the most vulnerable. So care is needed because of all of these retirements. So both the supply and demand side of this curve are affected. Next slide, please. So problem number 2 is this shift that's currently going on in healthcare, and it's this transition in the payment models from fee-for-service to value-based care. So what is fee-for-service? Well, it's basically where reimbursements are set for each test or service that is administered. So the more tests that you do and the more services that you perform, the more you get paid. So you could see that this kind of reimbursement model favors quantity over quality. So in contrast, what we're moving to is a value-based team care that is more on the qualitative side. So in a value-based model, reimbursements are bundled according to patient outcomes. So for instance, if a patient is being treated by a team of professionals for a chronic condition, let's say diabetes, that team gets paid based on the bundled services that they perform for that patient or for that outcome or for that episode. So it's not based on individual services. So, so reimbursements are better controlled that way. So what this really amounts to is that the employers need staff with specialized skills in order to be a part of this team, and so they can more proactively address the needs of their local population. Next slide, please. And then finally, there's been a shift in the traditional education model, and I'm sure that some of you are aware of this because this is near and dear to your hearts. Enrollment overall is decreasing. As a matter of fact, I've seen a statistic that in 2019, as compared to 2018, there was a decrease of 1.7% in overall school enrollment, and this trend has been going on for the past few years. And then also there have been a number of school closures, especially on the post-secondary side. Since 2010, there have been more than 2,000 career programs that have closed, and that's nearly half of them. So the student populations that have been displaced or dropped has been about 1.6 million. And then finally, there's been less of an emphasis on degree-bearing programs and more emphasis on the non-traditional student, including programs, students that go through programs from through career and technical education and from high schools. So all of those students that have been displaced by all those school closures are now, there's a need to get those students educated and trained and out into the workforce. So it actually puts all of you in a very good position. Next slide, please. So the current situation is that we need a lot more healthcare workers. In fact, employment of healthcare occupations is expected to grow 14% through 2028, which is much faster than any other set of occupations. And that is adding 1.9 million new jobs to the marketplace. And healthcare occupations will add more jobs than any other occupation group. Next slide. So let's take a look at some of the healthcare occupations that are most needed. I pulled these statistics out of the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and you're more than welcome to go onto the website and look this up. But I pulled out all the healthcare related ones, the top healthcare related ones. And so you will see that a number of them are actually don't require a college degree. So home health aides, number one healthcare related occupation with a large growth rate. Personal care aides is another one, and so forth down the line. And then finally, medical assistants, which is an occupation that we know very well because we all offer certification for it. There are huge shortages of medical assistants right now, so definitely someone needs to pick up the slack. And just as an aside, is kind of a funny, when I was looking at these occupations, I found a couple of them that are above home health aides. Home health aide actually is the number 3. The number 1 and number 2 occupations have to do with solar and wind turbine service technicians. So if you care to offer those in your high schools, those are the number 1 and number 2 occupations. Next slide. So what the employers need are healthcare workers who have flexible competencies, which means that they can be utilized in many different areas of healthcare, and especially those who have demonstrated their skills and competencies. And this demonstration is exactly where credentials come into play. So next slide. So what exactly is a credential? Here is a definition that's given by the U.S. Department of Labor's Credential Resource Guide. And I like it because it gives you the broad aspect of it. It's simply a verification of qualification or competence issued to an individual from a relevant authority or jurisdiction authorized to issue such credentials. And it gives you some examples here. So next slide. So these are all different types of credentials. So credentials to us is an umbrella term. It includes all of these things that are listed on the slide. So the first one is a license, which is a credential granted by some sort of federal or state or local agency. So it's a governmental agency. Then there is a degree or a diploma, and that's typically conferred by an educational institution such as yours. And then certification and certificate are two terms that some people get mixed up, and so I just wanted to spend a little bit more time talking about those. So the basic difference is that a certification is a third-party validation of what the student has learned. So there's typically a firewall between the curriculum and the exam. The entity developing the curriculum is different from the entity developing the exam. A good example of a certification is, and one that you're very familiar with probably, is Precision Exams. So they are a third-party certification agency that gives their exams to your students and they're not involved with your curriculum at all. AMT happens to be another type of certification agency, but we're on a slightly different level, and so we'll talk about that a little bit later. In a certificate situation, both the education and the test are coming from the same entity. So a student goes through some sort of a curriculum, and then they take the exam that is developed basically by the same entity who provides the curriculum. So that is a certificate. I hope that that's clear, but if not, we can answer some questions through chat. So next slide. So what is an industry recognized credential? Well, I've got a definition here. It's developed and endorsed by a nationally recognized industry association or organization. And this is the important part. It's what is sought or accepted by companies within the industry sector for the purposes of hiring or recruitment. So the healthcare industry or employers are driving the credential requirements. And we'll see this more at play when Nicole talks about how certification exams are developed. Okay, next slide. So here's another set of terms for accreditation. When you certify, it's basically for an individual, but accreditation is for entities such as labs, hospitals, or school programs. So I've listed a couple of school accreditors here, which are listed also. There's a number of school accreditors which are listed on the U.S. Department of Ed website, and I've included the link here. But there are three different types of accreditors. And again, this is for post-secondary education, not for high schools. So I'm telling you about this because this is what the industry is used to seeing and what they expect. So the people that they hire have training through programs which are accredited by these types of entities. So there are programmatic accreditors, and these accreditors accredit specific programs, and I'll use some examples in a bit. Then there are institutional accreditors who look more at the entire school as a whole. They don't necessarily spend a lot of time looking at each individual program within an institution, but instead they look at general structure of the school, their administrative policies, processes, procedures, and perhaps their financial standing. And then there are regional accreditors, and they're just like institutional accreditors, but they're specific to a certain region of the country. And there are accreditors for certification bodies such as AMT. So for instance, we are accredited through NCCA, one of the two organizations listed there. Okay, so next slide, please. So here are examples of two programmatic accreditors for medical assisting. And again, I mention these because we're very familiar with them. I know it's a alphabet soup here, and I don't know if you're familiar with them, but there's ABHES and KHEB, and KHEB is actually administered through MAYARD. So both of these entities provide very detailed information about what competencies are to be covered in a medical assisting curriculum. And I've given you exact places on the websites of these two organizations where you can find those competencies. Both of these organizations also dictate the number of externship hours that are required. For medical assisting, it's 160 clock hours of unpaid externship. And they also dictate the credentials that are acceptable for meeting the requirements, or what the students should be, who they should be credentialed through. So I strongly urge you, if you have or are interested in initiating a medical assisting program, to use these standards as a guide. And I'm sure other occupations have similar accreditors, but again, this is who we're familiar with. So the bottom line is, you have to look at what the general expectation in the industry is for a certain occupation, and use that as a guide as you develop your programs. You don't have to necessarily go through becoming accredited, but at least it will give you a starting point and a definite direction if you're looking to see what you should include in your curriculum. Next slide. So let's take a look at how industry recognized credentials are developed, and I'll turn this over to my colleague, Nicole. Nicole?
Thank you, Kathy. Well, as you can imagine, there are a number of components that go into an exam, or really any large-scale assessment program. So this graphic here represents the life cycle of an exam. And examination development is very much an ongoing iterative process where each exam program has a continuous life cycle that really begins with the construction and specification of the credential, or if you're working in another space, the purpose of the exam. And then it moves through each of these various development stages, which we will touch on the coming slides. And then at each of these stages in the exam life cycle, there's a number of security measures that are put into place to help ensure the integrity of the exam. So the foundation of a certification exam really begins with defining the competencies of the job role that you're seeking to certify. So establishing the criteria for certification really involves careful specification of the occupational scope of practice and the examination blueprint, which outlines all those tasks. And any well-developed certification program will rely on a very well-defined test blueprint, which is created from those knowledge, skills, and task statements that are shown to be critical to the job role. And demonstrating that link between these tasks and knowledge to the actual credentialing exam is done through a process that we call job task analysis. And the main goal of a job task analysis is to really outline those critical job tasks and competencies in order to align our exam content and specifications to current practice in the field. And this is really an important process because it ensures that our test blueprints are not only representative of knowledge and skill required for entry-level practice, but it aids in the creation of appropriate test items. We want to be sure that the items on our exams actually measure and reflect whether an individual is suited to practice. So a job task analysis is conducted periodically on an ongoing basis. It's typically every 5 to 7 years. Some fields like the tech space that will do them every 3 years because it's more rapidly changing. At AMT, we stick to every 5 years to conduct for each one of our programs. And this really helps make sure that the test blueprints and items, remain current with practice. So one common approach, and the one that we use at AMT, is to collect the data using a verification survey. And what we do is we get together with a group of subject matter experts who outline the job tasks and skills that they feel are relevant to the job role. And then we turn that into a survey, putting the statements with various rating scales, such as importance or frequency. You know, how important is this task to your job? How frequently is it done? You know, how critical is this for safe practice? There's a number of different ways that you can phrase it. And then the results of these surveys are used to construct the draft test specification document that actually allocates the number of items on our exam to these different content areas. So something that is more important or done more frequently will be given more weight and more items on the exam. And this step is really crucial just to ensure that the exam is reflective of practice. And it's not only, you know, a best practice element for test quality and validity, but it's also necessary for accreditation, as Kathy mentioned earlier, with organizations such as ANSI or NCCA. Any organization that wants their exam accredited has to show substantial evidence that the foundation of their exam is grounded in practice using appropriate measurement methods. So after, you know, we build the foundation of the exam and outline our competencies, we get into content development and the construction of good test items. So again, at this point, we work with subject matter experts to develop items that are validly and reliably, you know, measure these skills. And there's a number of things that have to be considered here, you know, whether the items align to the specifications, are they entry level, job related, address various cognitive levels. You know, we don't just want items that are rote memory, definition questions only, and are they free from bias? And then they're submitted for review. And there's also kind of a life cycle to an item. Once we send out writing assignments, we'll have an item written. It goes through about 3 rounds of subject matter experts to make sure that it's, you know, relevant and accurate. It goes through an editorial review to make sure that the grammar and spelling is all correct and that the style matches other items on our exam. And then it kind of goes through a psychometric edit to make sure that it follows the guidelines of good test writing. For example, you know, we don't accept items that are written with, you know, none of the above or all of the above. So we have to make sure that all the items meet these guidelines. And once it's passed all of those stages, it gets entered into our item bank as what we call a pre-test item. And it can be then inserted on an exam as an unscored item. And we like to see how it performs on the exam statistically. And if it performs well enough, then we turn that item into what we call an operational item that can then be a scored item on the exam. Now, after the item pool has been built and we have enough items that adequately address all of our competencies, we can then build our test forms. And we use the exam specifications as our guide to building the test forms. We will also usually do multiple test forms at a time, which not only like facilitates retesting of failing candidates because we don't want someone failing to take the same exact exam, but it also helps in security measures to address concerns of overuse of items or item exposure. When items are out there too long, people know them, they circulate them, and then all of a sudden they aren't effectively measuring their knowledge anymore. So another critical element of exam development called establishing a passing score or the level of performance required to pass. And we do this through standard setting, which is really the process of translating that performance standard to a score. The first step of that, we get subject matter experts together again, and we have them establish the performance standard where we actually have them define those skills that are necessary for them to know to be certified and work in the job role, and the things that would be considered not competent enough to pass. And once we have that working definition, there's a number of methods that we use to translate that to an actual score on the exam. Now, standard settings are kind of like job task analyses where they're done periodically. There's not a set standard for every so many years. You know, you always do one when you develop a new program, but you know, after so much time, you want to revisit your passing score to make sure that it's still reflective of the ability level that you're trying to certify. And things like, if there's a large change in content, maybe after a task analysis, you've changed your blueprint quite a bit, it's a good idea to reset your standard. And then once we have our test forms built, we go about publishing and administering our exams.
Fur seals, sea lions, and walruses can pull their back flippers under their bodies to use as legs.
Sorry, I'm getting some feedback on something.
However, can't use their rear flippers for
Is-
walking.
Everyone make sure that you're muted. We're hearing about sea lions. Okay.
How do seals?
All right. So there are a lot of quality checks that we build into the process of publishing and delivering our exams. We devote a lot of time to loading the assessments onto secure platforms. As Kathy mentioned before, we work with Pearson VUE. And so we work closely with them to ensure that our test items scoring, all aspects of the exam are executed with the highest degree of quality control and security possible. And this process usually takes anywhere from 4 to 8 weeks, depending on the backlog, and we go back and forth. And then after we have published and administered our exam, the next step is exam analysis. And at AMT, we do exam analysis twice a year. Some programs do more or less frequently. We will, when we launch a new form, check in with it about a month later to make sure that it's running smoothly. But twice a year, we do a full data analysis on every form that's been administered that year. And there are 2 main components to our analysis, an item level and a test form level. And at the item level, there's a number of different indices that we look at, which include the difficulty of the item, the discrimination, how well it discriminates between high and low performers. And then we do a detailed distractor analysis of all distractors within the item to make sure that they are being chosen and that they're being chosen by candidates that are lower performing. If an item is only using one distractor in the correct answer, it's not giving us enough information. So we look at stuff like that and toss them when we need. And then at the test form level, we look at both the reliability of the form, making sure that it's performing consistently across candidates and that it's valid, that we're validly passing people that should pass and those that should not. Now, exam maintenance is really key to consistent performance and pretty much encompasses everything that we've just been going over. This is an ongoing process where you want to make sure you're doing your data analysis, checking in with all of your data. You have subject matter experts that are ready to review the item performance. You want to make sure that you're revising and deleting any items that are misperforming and that your content is being reviewed constantly, not just the operational items out at the time, but those in the bank to make sure that everything is still relevant, accurate, entry level, all of those things. And then new items, we're constantly getting new content and new item development through the pipeline. And lastly, one of the most critical components really is exam security. You want to make sure that the tests are delivered with the level of security appropriate for the stakes associated with the test scores. And so in our space, certification is a very high stakes exam. So our exams are all delivered with the most secure monitored environments. Anytime that you are issuing a credential that can affect the health and safety of the public and the practitioners, it's obviously high stakes. And any high stakes certification organization will devote a significant resource to security through their choice of test vendor. So we work with Pearson VUE, which allows us a lot of security on our end. And on the front side of security, there's 3 main things that we look at. Identification, making sure that the individual showing up to test is actually the one seeking this credential. Securing the environment to make sure that they aren't bringing in devices and materials to help them cheat. And really the most important is protecting the intellectual property of the exam program. We spend a lot of time, money, and resources into building these, and we need to make sure that our content is not stolen or used improperly. When security is breached, it really jeopardizes the validity of the exam and the certification. You know, our certification is kind of like a stamp of approval that this individual is ready and able to perform at a safe and acceptable level of practice. And so if our security is compromised, it doesn't hold the same weight. So it really is important for us to ensure that the content remains secure. And with that, Kathy, I will go ahead and turn it back over to you.
Okay, thank you, Nicole. So you all have an opportunity to train and contribute to the healthcare workforce by providing competent individuals who will either be hired directly into positions or those that you're preparing to continue with their education. So here are some things that you should consider as you move towards this goal. One is to develop and implement a curriculum that is aligned with and follows industry standards. And then the second point is to work with your local area employers to make sure that you're meeting their workforce needs. You may also want to take a look at some local job ads to see what responsibilities are required for certain occupations, as well as the training and education or credentials that are required for the job. And then, of course, you want a credential along the way to demonstrate all of those competencies and make sure that they are achieved and you're demonstrating that. So again, I'll mention precision exams. So if you're doing end of course or end of program credentials, that is one certain way to make sure that you are testing your students along the way, make sure that they are prepared. And then, of course, once you complete all of that, you may want to have your students take a national industry recognized exam that will serve them well as they go out there and actually look for a job, because that's what the employers are looking for, someone that they recognize as a certification body. Next slide, please. So the ultimate solution is really a partnership between all of you as educators or trainers and employers, as I mentioned before, and then of course the learners, which are students that you represent. I personally see the industry recognized exam at the intersection of all of these partnerships, as we kind of touch on each of these three, and we are, you know, the conduit to having all of this kind of streamlined and work together. So next slide, please. So I just wanted, that ends our formal presentation, but I wanted to tell you a little bit more about AMT. We're a nonprofit certification agency. So all of our certificates of people who pass our exam are automatically members of our association. And so we continue with them after they get certified, and we are their career partner, and we make sure that they continue with their competencies, and we offer them a number of different things that they can use throughout their career to help them. We've been around since 1939, so we are well recognized and respected in the industry. And as I mentioned before, all of our competency-based exams are accredited through NCCA. And then we have over 86,000 currently certified allied health professionals working in the field. Next slide, please. So here are the exam-based certifications that we offer. You can see we do medical assisting, phlebotomy technician. One that I may want to point out a little bit more is the medical lab assistant certification, which is a college degree is not required at all, and it's a very good entry level into the lab field. So that is one that you may want to consider. And these are the folks that work in commercial reference labs and other labs across the U.S., and you're hearing about them right now because of the coronavirus. But these are, like I said, the entry level into the lab field. I want to mention there's one other certification that we offer that is not listed here that you all may be interested in, and it's not an exam-based certification, but it's allied health instructor. So that is a portfolio based, it's based on education and experience. But this, for the instructors out there, that is one certification that we do offer, again, non-exam based. The next slide. So finally, I've listed the website, our website, and along with our email contact information. The number that you see here is, the phone number is a general number, but probably the best way to reach both me and Nicole are through email. One thing that I do want to mention on our website, there's a couple of good resources that you may want to check out. One is for all of those certifications that I just mentioned. If you go on our website and go under Get Certified and then eligibility criteria, you can see the exact criteria for each of our certifications. So what is required for students to qualify to sit for our exams. I've also included, and Nancy will include it with a presentation, a summary of all of those eligibility criteria. So you'll have at a glance look at as well. I don't see that CMLA, the lab assistant one, is listed, so you'll have to go onto the website for that. But they're available for you. The other resource on our website that may be useful to you is, again, if you go under Get Certified and then Prepare for Exam, we have all of the content outlines of our exam, and some of them are very, very detailed, and it gives you an exact, not exact, but it's a percentage of questions that are on each topic in the certification exam. So again, very useful for you as instructors or teachers to see what is included. It's a test blueprint of our exam. I've included also with the presentation a white paper that lists competencies for a medical assistant, and it's an interesting read. And then I also wanted to let you know that we're currently working on offering a couple of free education topics that may be relevant to your students. So as you're kind of trying to figure out what to offer to your students online during this crisis, we're offering this for a limited time to you all. And Nancy will tell you exactly where that is. So with that, I'll end the presentation and we'll be happy to answer questions. Thank you.
Okay, so if Nicole and Kathy, if you can just stay unmuted, I'll try to capture some of the questions here. Do you publish a cut score for any of your credentialing examinations?
We do not.
Okay. Also, there was a question about, is there a reason for that, or is there any more explanation you want to provide for that?
It's a complicated process. I don't know of any certification or licensing agency that actually relays that information. You know, you get it's all standardized so that like our passing score is 70 on all of our exams, but the actual cut score performance standard is kind of information that is not shared.
I would agree. I would agree as a registered nurse, and the Board of Nursing doesn't publish that either, but sometimes we get that question from teachers, and so I wanted to address that. There's a question here from Anthony about, and it's probably for you, Nicole, as a psychometrician. I like to say that word, psychometrician. What do you mean by discriminate?
Discriminate is a statistical property that actually tells us within the item how well between high and low performers an item looks. So if it has a high value, that means that we can tell that, you know, high performers are getting this item correct and low performers are getting this item wrong, which is the kind of discrimination value you want. That means that the item is performing properly. There are times when you get an item where for some reason it's written confusingly and your top performers are getting the answer incorrect and your bottom performers are getting it correct. And that's obviously not a good item, and that's what we mean by discrimination.
Okay, thank you. Do you have any other languages, or how do you offer your exams, and in other languages for students that English may not be their first language.
I don't believe that we offer, I know we don't offer our certifications in another language, and Nicole may want to speak to how difficult that is and translate. There's a whole process in.
Yeah, no, it's something that it's really hard to do, and it does take a lot of time and resources to actually adequately take an exam and translate it to a different language so it means the same thing in both languages. And so at this time, AMT does not offer.
Okay. I'm looking to see if there were any other questions. There was a question about certified nurse aide from Pauline, and I think we've answered that. Is that, Phyllis, you're welcome to unmute too, because I know you're very knowledgeable about the certified nurse aide, but those certifying bodies may vary from state to state. So you would need to check, within your state, whether they use Pearson VUE or there's a couple of others, I think, that are available. Kathy Andrews had a question about where to locate the white paper. And so if you go to healthscienceconsortium.org/webinar, you will find all the webinars that we've had over the past year or two. And so we post the recording, like today's recording will be there by Friday. And then along with the recording, any documents that Kathy and Nicole allowed us to post will be there as well. So this PowerPoint will be there, as well as the two papers that Kathy mentioned in closing. So look for that by Friday.
Nancy, there's also a question. Peg mentioned that you had said something about the two most in-demand jobs at the beginning of the presentation. That might have been Nicole. One of the jobs was wind, solar energy, but she didn't hear the second one. She was wondering what that one was. Nicole, is that you?
No, it was Kathy.
That was Kathy.
Okay, I'm sorry. I couldn't remember which one talked about that. Is Kathy on?
Okay, we may have lost. Let's see if Kathy just put the source there for the job. She put the link there, Peg. You should be able to see that.
Thank you.
Okay. Solar. It was solar and wind turbines, and I don't know if one was solar and one was wind, but Gwen says she thinks so. Also, there was a question about 18 and students getting certifications before they're 18. Let's just talk about AMT. What do you have to be a certain age to sit for your exam? Those exams that you had on the screen there?
That's better suited for Kathy, that question, and I don't know if she's on. I'm not 100% sure if there is an age limit on our exams.
Okay, but I know Sanford's also talking about their ability to be able to work, and that varies from organization to organization, and sometimes state to state, and sometimes career specialty area to career specialty area.
Hello, can you guys hear me?
We hear you, Kathy, but there's a lot of feedback.
I'll try again. No. All right, I will not speak.
Okay, anybody, let's see, Cindy, do we have your question here?
She said, since most of the exams are post-secondary, is there a time limit once the student has received the certification? She said, sorry, I didn't send the question quickly enough to follow the under 18 question. I realize that each certification follows the criteria for each, and I can't see the rest of the question. So Cindy's asking about post-secondary and time limit. So that may have kind of been answered by or that maybe one Kathy needed to answer.
Okay.
Let's see. Oh, it says because they're still,
Students can test before 18, but employers cannot have them on site under 18.
okay.
And then someone, thank you, Janet. I know Kathy put in the website where this information is. It's also in your confirmation email, or in all the promotions that we do about the webinars. We always put the link where the recordings would be found, or you can go to our website and just search for webinars. But we always try to put that on every promotional item about the webinars where the posting will be found.
Here's one. Are there industry areas that may accept high school certifications as entry-level positions? I have high school students who are obtaining certifications, but industry will not recognize them because they are in high school. I know I had that issue. Is Kathy on still, or Nicole? Is that something you wanted to answer, or I can share?
Go ahead.
Okay. One of the things that I found when I was at the State Department in Georgia was that a lot of times the industry people just saw them as high school students. They really didn't understand what all the kids were learning. And so in addition to taking in like a certificate or whatever to show, we tried to show the curriculum and the things that they'd mastered. And then they're like, oh, I didn't know they did all that, you know. So I think that's one reason you have to really work with your industry partners and have them understand. It's kind of like, you know, until they come to like a HOSA event or something, unless they visit your classroom and look at your curriculum and look at what you're doing, they just kind of breeze over it, and you know, they're busy and all. But I mean, I think that if we really show them what the kids are learning and doing and mastering, they're more likely to consider it. And a lot of times HIPAA is one of the main things, HIPAA and safety and infection control, which obviously now that's a huge issue too, but are some of the things they're concerned about. So that's just my take on it, but someone else may have another answer for that.
I see a few other questions here, but I think that people have answered them within the chat box about if there's computer-based exam, and their exams are delivered by computer through Pearson VUE. And let's see, it seems like there was one other one.
Someone wants to know where the white paper has the list of competencies.
I addressed that.
You did that one? Get that one? Okay.
I'll address it again, though. It'll be at healthscienceconsortium.org/webinars, and it'll accompany the recording of today's webinar. Okay. So this PowerPoint, as well as the other documents that Kathy mentioned, will be posted there by Friday.
Okay. See if we've missed any. This person said, why not accept the certification if a student has passed a national exam? Doesn't that explain the curriculum? You know, it depends on what I think, in my opinion, it depends on what you're given from that testing agency that you can show them. If it just shows, so in the case that I was referring to, we were taking the consortium end of program exam, and it did, you know, show which areas they scored well in, which, you know, categories they did well. But we actually took that our national health science standards in and showed them those standards that were matching our curriculum, and that's what would impress them. They just needed to dig a little bit deeper and see it. So that was just my experience. That might not be the case for somebody else, but it made a difference for us. Our hospital system, one of our hospital organizations did a survey of their hospitals. They were primarily the smaller, more rural hospitals, but they surveyed them and asked them, you know, why would you let students come in work in your program or intern or do all these other examples? And they were reluctant, and they said what some of their reluctance was, and some of it was, how do I really know that they've, you know, they've done these things, or how do I really know that they can do this? And that's why we realized we needed to show them in a little bit more in-depth manner. And we had their test results and all, but we had to be careful. We had to show the class set. We couldn't show an individual students, but it just really did make a difference. You know, and it may not always make a difference, but in our case, it did help.
Okay, we'll take this last question here because it's about 5 o'clock and it's from Eileen Costa. So Eileen, I don't know if you were able to attend the webinar that we did last Wednesday. It was completely focused on online resources for health science teachers. And so if you go to that website, I'm not going to say it again because y'all are tired of hearing it, but if you go there, you can see the webinar. There's also a PowerPoint that has links. And in those links, you'll see resources that some of our generous partners have shared access to their online curriculum through the end of the year at no cost. There's also a fully developed Google Drive, and you don't have to have, you can click right on that. You don't have to have a Google account, but you can click on that link. And we had teachers who got very, very busy and created a fully developed, comprehensive resource, complete online for you to be able to use that hopefully you'll find some information there that'll be helpful for you. We also have the health science curriculum enhancements. That's a product that's been around for a while that the consortium developed about 8 years ago. And that's a downloadable, a purchase in our online store. And it's there now. And if you had a PO from your school for states that are members of the consortium, that resource is $300. For non-member states, it's $450. But the cool thing about that is we're having that resource is being revised in a big way to match the National Health Science Standards that were updated in May of last year. And so if you purchase it now for an additional $50, you can get the completely revised enhancements, which will be available in August of 2020. So just wanted to throw that out if anybody needed that resource is available through our online store. Hey. Well, thank you everyone for coming. Remember, if you need a certificate to document your participation, you can email me. You have my email that you received today, a reminder about this opportunity, so you can email me and I'll be happy to create that for you and send it back to you electronically. Look forward to seeing you if you can attend on April 1st. We'll be doing one on the how and why of organ and tissue donation, and that would be one that would be appropriate for students too. So if you wanted to come and watch and then create a lesson around that and have your students go back and watch it, that would be a way to expose them to organ and tissue donation, because May is National Donate Life Month. Have a good rest of your Wednesday, everyone.
Thank you. You too.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.